everyone, I'm Leanne and today I'm going to recommend to you some short non-fiction books. So it is non-fiction November, so I thought this was the perfect time to talk to you about some short non-fiction books that I have really enjoyed and would really recommend to you. I feel like non-fiction can sometimes feel like quite intimidating, and I don't think it needs to be. Also, I'm very conscious that in November, people are looking towards their reading goal if they have one in terms of like quantity of books, which isn't the only metric to like measure a successful reading year. But I know some people, they do have their goals that they are trying to reach in terms of number of books read in a year. And some short books around this time of the year are always good to have on your list. Obviously, this stack of books is quite indicative of like my own personal nonfiction reading tastes. But if you're on this channel, you probably share some of those tastes. So there's a like variance in like the length of these books, but I definitely feel like all of them you could read in a day. I'm going to start with this little trio. So these are actually the only nonfiction books that I have that don't sit on like my nonfiction shelf, because they're like just so beautiful as this little stack. So I kind of have them as decor in the living room. And the first of those is What Writers Read, 35 Writers on Their Favorite Book, edited by Pandora Sykes. But it has contributions from many, many different writers, as it says 35 different writers, about why they write, what their motivation for writing is, some of the other works that have inspired them to be writers. I will say that this book is actually deceptively long for like the size of it, because it is such like this dinky kind of gifty hardback. And I do think something like this would make a great kind of Christmas present if you're thinking about gifting books for Christmas, especially for like the book lover in your life, because it's so difficult to buy them a book if you don't know like maybe what they've already read and that kind of thing. I think something like this is quite good. But I will say that I actually think this is one of the longer ones on this list of recommendations, but still definitely one that you could read in a day. Alternatively, like reading one of these like every night before bed, I think would be really fun. And there's 35, so a little bit more than like days that are in a month, but it would be quite a nice thing to do, I think, to like read one of these contributions every night, and then on a couple of nights you do a couple more. Then I have On Connection by Kay Tempest. So Kay Tempest is a poet that I've been a huge fan of for years and years and years, and this is a non-fiction essay, which is another one that I think would make a really good gift for like the creative person in your life or like a writer in your life. The essay is essentially an exploration of how we form connection through creativity, and I think it's very like tender and honest, and has a really beautiful use of language, which you would obviously expect from this author because Kay is a poet. And then finally, Mary Beard's Women in Power, a Manifesto. So this is another essay, or actually I think this might be a written version of a speech that she gave once. Mary Beard, of course, a very well-known like historian, classicist, and this explores like gendered power dynamics throughout the classics. It looks like individual power, but also kind of like structural power. And I think it's just a really kind of intelligent discussion around those topics. I think what's really great about having like short nonfiction is that it can cover like really kind of intellectually stimulating or like challenging topics, but because it is told with like brevity or discussed with brevity, or like being really concise, it's a way of making those kind of really thoughtful things quite accessible. So you are kind of learning, thinking, reflecting, but it doesn't feel too intimidating. There's quite a few nonfiction books in those classic collections like the Penguin Little Black Classics or the Penguin Mini Moderns. So here I have Letter from Birmingham Jail by Martin Luther King and The Master's Tools Will Never Dismantle the Master's House by Audre Lorde. And I think this is a really great way of it, like engaging with really kind of influential and important thinkers, and engaging with like important and powerful moments in history through a reading experience where you hopefully feel like you can take your time with it. Like, even though a lot of these books that I'm talking about are short, I'm not like suggesting that you blitz through them. I'm actually kind of suggesting that because they are short, you maybe take a bit more kind of time and care with them. I think that kind of thought process definitely applies to What White People Can Do Next and Disobedient Bodies, both by Emma Dabiri. This one, I guess, is like somewhat what it says on the tin. Emma Dabiri is the author of Don't Touch My Hair. She talks a lot about kind of race and colorism, specifically through like an Irish lens, as well as someone that grew up Black in Ireland. And this book largely explores how kind of racial power dynamics are so inextricably linked with like capitalism. And Bodies is similar in the sense that it's taking a look at the topic of bodies and how kind of the beauty industry is so inextricably linked with capitalism. I think both of these books have a really kind of personal touch to something that is kind of really political. And the topics that she looks at in these books are really challenging and really difficult. And she's raising quite a lot of very kind of intellectual considerations in these books. So again, these are ones that I'm not suggesting that you really like blitz through and read as quickly as you can, because they are very like intellectually stimulating. I would love to recommend A Room of One's Own by Virginia Woolf. I should revisit this book because I pored over it when I was at university. Anyone that did like an English lit degree, especially if you were kind of covering gender as a topic within that, I'm sure you would have cited A Room of One's Own over and over again. This grew out of a lecture that Virginia Woolf gave at Cambridge in 1928, and she essentially explores this idea of kind of power within gender and writing, and how because women don't have a space of their own to write in, kind of explore their creativity, they are at a disadvantage when compared to men who do maybe have like a desk space and study in the home. She was talking about this in the 1920s, but I think it is so applicable to modern day, and is not just applicable to kind of gender. There are so many kind of racial and class dynamics to that as well. It's such an important text, and one that you can read, you know, easily within like an hour. A Manual for Heartache by Kathy Rensenbrink is definitely one that you can read like within a very short space of time, but like depending on where you are mentally, you might not want to do that. It explores the topic of heartbreak, you know, what it means to experience grief and loss, you know, how we as humans heal through the very worst things that can happen to us. And I think it depends like what type of person you are and how you approach those kind of feelings, like whether this is something you would want to read like very slowly over a long period of time, or if you are someone like me that really kind of leans into those feelings. A lot of the things she talks about in this book are things that I have experienced, and I found a lot of value in kind of immersing myself in what she was saying, and it has a really kind of hopeful tone to it, even though it's talking about some of the most difficult moments you might experience in your life. I think it's a really like powerful and also comforting read. I'd really like to recommend the entire Outspoken series. So these are non-fiction books that are published by Pluto Press, who are kind of a radical left-wing publisher. This is one of my favorites. It is Masculinity Redefined by J.J. Bola, but there are lots of different books in this series, and they are another one where they are looking at quite what can be like very kind of intellectual topics, but they are all written in a way that really kind of breaks down quite complex things. It doesn't like dumb them down in any way. Each of the authors in this series just do a phenomenal job of getting their like point across. There are quite a few books in this series, all written by kind of experts around the different topics. Some that I've already read, some I'm looking forward to reading. They may be ones that you would like to read in a day, like you definitely could, or they could be ones that you would want to take in kind of bite-sized chunks. But I think the way the books are formatted really lend themselves to either reading experience. Unshook by Una Min Kavanagh is definitely one that you could read within a day, but is on the longer side of these recommendations. I mean, it is under 200 pages, but it is one of the longer ones on this list of recommendations. And this is about a woman named Una Min, whose story begins in Vietnam in 1991, when she is adopted at just 3 days old by a woman from Kerry in Ireland. And Una Min grows up raised very immersed in kind of Irish culture. She speaks Irish. Her Irish identity is really instilled in her, but of course it is a multifaceted identity because she is from Vietnam. In this book, she speaks really honestly about her relationship with being Irish and also being Vietnamese, what she experiences in Ireland on like a positive note and also on a negative note. She doesn't shy away from kind of sharing the experiences that she has had with racism in the country, and how she has also become a real kind of ambassador for the Irish language, which is something that I love. And particularly the relationship that she has with her grandfather was a really beautiful part of this book. So some of the books I've recommended have been quite like intellectually stimulating topics. I would say these next few recommendations are really fun. So this is What Would the Spice Girls Do by Lauren Bravo. And this is a reflection of, you know, the cultural impact of the Spice Girls, but also more broadly kind of the culture of girl power in the 1990s and early noughties. I think people really kind of often underestimate the significance of the cultural impact that the Spice Girls had. Like, they were huge and they were so influential in the culture. Like, I feel they are so inextricably linked with the culture at that time. But I also think their position within kind of feminist history is quite complex, and like their version of feminism is flawed in many ways, but also hugely impactful and important. But looking at all of those things through a real kind of pop culture lens is a very entertaining take from this book. And I would recommend, obviously for like the Spice Girls fans in your life, but anyone that is interested in kind of pop culture phenomena. This is How to Have Feminist Sex, a fairly graphic guide by Flo Perry. This is really entertaining. Like, it is really what it says on the tin. It is how to have feminist sex, but it is told in a very kind of entertaining, humorous way. It does touch on kind of like some serious topics, but it is in many ways very lighthearted, very entertaining. I think it's a very self-aware book that explores lots of kind of connected topics around like body image and consent, topics like masturbation, monogamy, like hookup culture, the role that kind of the digital spaces play in people's sexual lives. It's a really entertaining book, and just kind of generally, I think graphic non-fiction books are a really great way of reading some like shorter non-fiction. And then finally, a dual recommendation for Weird Things Customers Say in Bookshops and More Weird Things Customers Say in Bookshops, both by Jen Campbell. I think if you are in the bookish world in any way, whether that is a bookseller or not, you will find a lot of entertainment in these collections of funny things that Jen has overheard or said to her while she was working as a bookseller. As someone that did used to be a bookseller, I can confirm that I've heard lots of kind of similar or like near exact things as many of the accounts that are in this book. Really entertaining books, perfect for like anyone that you know that is bookish, like super relatable and entertaining in that way. So those are my very short nonfiction recommendations. Let me know down in the comments if you read any of these and if you liked them, or if you have any recommendations for me for other short nonfiction books. What emoji should you leave me? Maybe like if there's a microphone emoji in honor of What Would the Spice Girls Do? And also because some of these books are like adapted from like lectures or speeches, I feel like the microphone emoji kind of works for that. That's it for me today. I hope you're well, and I'll speak to you in my next video.